Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everybody. This is the Microsoft 365 Platform Community Call for November 29th, 2022. I am Brian T. Jackett, your host for today. It's been a little while since I've been back, but glad to see all you folks again. Today, we got some great different kind of conversations and topics that we'll be covering. But first, we'll kick off things with our normal set of different news and different kind of updates that are going on in the Microsoft 365 developer platform. We'll also do our group time together mode. Dave will be gracious enough to be capturing that for us. And then we'll jump into our real stars for today, all the different demos that we have. We have Sebastian and Gavin. You're going to talk to us a little bit about an update on the Microsoft Graph Toolkit. We have Philip and Jose, who will also be talking to us about the accessing Microsoft 365 data at scale using Microsoft Graph Data Connect. And then finally, we'll wrap things up with John Miller to give us a little introduction to what is new with the Microsoft Teams Toolkit. So for those of you who are new or joining in for the first time, or if you are a regular and you've been around for a while, we do always want to cover some of the different resources and things that are available to you inside of our different communities and other resources. First, we have two different channels you can take a look at for various recordings, for videos, for other types of instructional material. We have our Microsoft 365 developer videos at aka.ms/m365dev YouTube, as well as our community videos for recordings such as this call and many others. You can find those as well at aka.ms/m365/videos. As well, a number of the different things that are going on in the Microsoft 365 developer platform. These are open source, so you can see a number of different resources that you can go in, be able to feel free to open up issues, be able to take a look at what kind of features and other things are being developed on that type of open source repos. We also have a number of different sample galleries. So if you're looking for actually be able to take the things you're hearing and seeing about today, where can we actually see some of those things implemented, or maybe some of the different kind of sample solutions that are out and available for there. A lot of different great resources. You can find the one resource for those at aka.ms/m365/samples. And then again, always our one-stop shop for all the various different areas. No need to remember all the different URLs. This is just the one that you do need is aka.ms/m365/community. You can find all the invites, all the links to the different open source repos, and many, many more things. Do note that we do have a number of other different community calls that are also going on. This is our M365 platform weekly call on Tuesdays. We also have another number of other ones you can find for identity, for Office add-ins, for Power Platform, for video connection to the SharePoint framework, and many more. You can find all the different invites and schedules for these at aka.ms/m365/calls. If you are getting new or you want to be able to start working with a sandbox to sort of tenant or other ways to kind of develop your solutions, got a couple different great resources for you. First is our Microsoft 365 developer program. With this, you do get a free tenant that is valid for 90 days. As long as you continue to use that, it actually will self-renew. You can find more at aka.ms/m365/dev program. And we also have a number of different training materials that are completely free for you to be able to consume at your own pace and be able to start to kind of ramp up on the different areas within M365. You can find more at aka.ms/m365/dev/learn. Also, a couple of different podcasts that you may want to pay attention to. We have the first one on here, our Microsoft 365 developer podcast with our very own Jeremy Thake and Paul Schaeflein. Also, IGFS is also another one of our presenters for that. They do a number of different interviews into folks that are in the development space, either project managers, or even now we're doing some different kind of interviews with folks out into our ISV ecosystem. So getting to actually see what are people building, what is the latest, greatest features that are being released for this. You can find more at m365devpodcast.com. And we also have our Microsoft 365 PMP Weekly with Vesa and Waldeck being able to show us a little bit more about, again, the latest news and information that's going on in our ecosystem, but also interviews with a lot of different folks like MVPs, some of our guest contributors and folks like that to actually get to see how are you developing your career, or what are ways that you've contributed back to our various different ecosystems. So great ways to kind of see what's going on both internally and externally as well for both of those podcasts. You can find more for the PMP Weekly at aka.ms/PMP Weekly or on the podcast pmpweekly.podbean.com location. And as always, we'd love to highlight out there the various different samples that have been contributed. These are coming from Microsoft as well as community members. So we love that folks are contributing back. There are samples across a wide number of different technology stacks. So if you're looking for ways to be able to actually go and see these things running in your own developer sandbox, again, like our dev program tenants, a great way you can go and take a look at these things at aka.ms/m365/samples. We now have over 1,300 samples. I can remember when we first started this call, kind of the combined call together, we were back in the hundreds. We have really, really grown this over that time. Love to see community contributing back, and we hope to see actually hit this into further reaches. Would love to see us hit into that 1,500 range. So please do keep sharing back, be able to vote up things and engage in there as much as possible. And we'll turn things over to David to talk to us a little bit about our Sharing is Caring initiative.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian. Well, I tell you what, friends, 1,300 samples. Holy cow, right? Holy cow. Where did all those come from? Well, they come from amazing contributors like you. They are community sourced by the community for the community. But we understand that sometimes getting those samples or learning how to navigate some of these waters is a little confusing. So Sharing is Caring is a program we've set up for you that provides hands-on guidance in a safe space opportunity. What does that mean? It means we're going to get on a call with you that's not recorded. We're going to walk you through how to do things like submitting your first pull request or understanding how the GitHub repositories are set up, how you can use nothing but a browser to submit your samples and have them contributed and included in that list of samples. And bonus, they're going to show up at adoption.microsoft.com. So these are absolutely all free. We've already got some new ones scheduled out. General first-time contributor, Power Platform samples contributor, writing for the web. We've got even more coming up in the new year. We understand December is a little bit of a downtime and family time. So we're scheduling those out in January and some in further months as well. So don't hesitate to take a look. There's absolutely no cost. You can register for any and all at aka.ms/sharingiscaring. Brian, back to you.
Excellent. Thanks so much, David. And we do look forward to folks joining in for those and be able to contribute back. I love to see community joining in. Also want to note that we actually have something going on later today. This is the App Camp workshop for Microsoft Teams apps. A great way to actually be able to see from a lot of our cloud dev advocates and other folks how can you actually go and build Teams apps. This is the first time for you, or if you're looking to get some additional instructions or could be able to ask some kind of questions. This is actually going on later today. At 4 to 5 p.m. Pacific time. This may not fit everybody's schedules, but we do want to have this available. There are also materials you can go and take a look at, aka.ms/app-camp, where you can find more about this. So please do join in and sign up for that. And next, going a quick little lap around the different news and updates going on in the Microsoft 365 ecosystem. We got a couple different posts out here. It is getting a little bit slower as we're getting into the kind of final month within the calendar year, but a couple things we do want to highlight out there. First is we actually just released a Microsoft Graph Python SDK. It's going into public preview. This is a great thing where we're actually expanding into new languages and new areas of support. We've heard a lot of requests for this. You can go and see the actual preview release for this, be able to file issues, open up feedback items onto that. So if you'd like to, please take a look at that blog post, find all the resources and things available for that. Also, I want to share a quick update on the Outlook REST API v2 deprecation updates. For this, we had announced some dates previously in the past. As we're approaching what those timelines previously were, I believe it was at the end of November. We've heard some feedback in terms of being able to have some essential delays for this, give people a little bit more time to actually complete their work for migrating over, whether it's into Graph or other sets of APIs. Take a look at the blog post. You can find most updated information on this. We want to make sure that everybody has a chance and the resources that they need to be able to migrate over to things. Last one to round out our M365 developer blog was also for our Microsoft Bookings service. Some of our PMs have put together a number of different sample scripts using the Microsoft Graph PowerShell SDK. This can actually help you find things like, hey, where do I have some inactive calendars within bookings? Or maybe if you want to have things where there's been no activity within specific calendar, or things that might be potentially orphaned based on people either leaving the team or leaving the organization. So some great samples out there that you can take a look at to be able to manage your Microsoft Booking service a little bit more effectively. And then lastly, on our SharePoint blog, we also had a new episode of the IntraZone podcast with our very own Mark Cashman and Chris McNulty. Some good information about the OneDrive service with some of the PMs who are behind this. So if you'd like to, please subscribe to that podcast and also find out more information on the blog post. With this, I'll turn things over to, I believe, Survi is here to talk to us a little bit more about the Teams platform updates.
Thank you, Brian. Hi, everyone. So we recently revamped the authentication module to cover tab, bots, and messaging extensions. So I quickly share my screen and walk you through the changes that we've made. So here we go. We first have an overview that covers what all we've covered in this topic. Coming to the configuring in Azure AD, this section includes detailed steps to configure a bot resource at Azure AD app in Azure portal. There are two ways to undertake this configuration. You can either select using the configure a bot resource and create a new or use an existing app ID. In the next file, which is add code. This section includes the code snippets that need to be added for enabling SSO. The snippets follow the code samples that are shared on the same page. Bot and messaging extensions. The section uses zone pivots to include code updates for both bot and messaging extension apps. And then we go to the update manifest, which includes the updates required in the Teams manifest to enable SSO. As an addition, it also covers enabling SSO for a bot app in developer portal. And finally, the graph permissions. This section includes adding Microsoft Graph permissions in Azure AD. While it doesn't provide code updates required, it does inform you the code that updates will be required further. So these were the main updates. Please use this feedback feature to give us any feedback that you may have on this module. And that was all that we have. If you have further feedback, please post your comments on aka.ms Teams platform feedback. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing about that, Serpi. I'm going to go flip back to our next slide. Now we're actually going to go ahead and do our group picture time. We have Seb joining us. Love to see his example of how we can do our hand waving on here. So if you'd like to, feel free to turn on your cameras. I'm going to switch over, or David, do you want to share your screen, or are you doing the group together mode?
Yeah, no problem. I got it. No problem.
Perfect.
So everybody get those cameras turned on. Show us your fantastic faces. Give you just a minute. Ooh, somebody's
that's good.
Somebody's spelunkering. Is that spelunkering? Looks like.
Excellent.
All right.
Rows filling in here. Plenty more spaces. Feel free to jump in with your cameras on, folks.
All right, let's just get it cranking on. Couple more seats.
Hand waving time. Put those hands up. Love to see your smiling faces.
Looking fantastic. There's Seb setting the example. All right. Excellent. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much. All right, let's jump back over to our slides and we'll dive into our main presenters for today. First up, we'll have Seb and Gavin talking to us about the update on Microsoft Graph Toolkit. Next will be Philip and Jose talking about Microsoft Graph Data Connect. And finally, rounding things out with John to talk to us a little bit about Microsoft Teams Toolkit. First, Seb and Gavin, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brian. Let me share my screen right away so we can see the beautiful slides we prepared for today. Well, folks, today we're going to talk a little bit, myself and Gavin, we're going to talk about the latest on the Microsoft Graph Toolkit. If you were part of the couple weeks we did our journey around the Graph Toolkit, we did 15 sessions on the toolkit at the beginning of this year. I was always saying that we were going to release a new version of the Graph Toolkit. Well, we are getting very, very, very close. I would love to give you a little bit of a hint of what is happening and also use this session to gather some feedback. So we're going to share a couple of links in the chat for you to go on and share some of the feedback you might have on the Graph Toolkit so you can help us identify maybe gaps that we have or maybe cool ideas that we could be working on for our latest version of the Graph Toolkit. So let's start with what is the Graph Toolkit? Maybe it's the first time you're joining this community call. You don't know exactly what is the Graph Toolkit. The toolkit is a collection of reusable framework agnostic components and auth provider that allows you to access and work with Microsoft Graph. Components are fully functional, they're fully customizable, and they work with any web framework on all modern browsers. So think about a drag and drop of a component that automatically connects to Microsoft Graph and enables you to focus on your business scenarios rather than building boring controls. We're taking the work of building the controls you need. You embed them in your app so you can really build business value rather than building the controls you've been asking over and over and over. Why would you think about the Graph Toolkit? First, it cuts insanely on development time because it's basically just a couple of lines of code that you drop into your app rather than building all the logic, all the state, all the graph management, all the tokens and everything. We take care of the hard stuff because it's beautiful, but it is flexible. It's built to be looking like an M365 experience, but it's also fully customizable so you can embed it and make it really your own. And it works everywhere. We're not shipping a React or an Angular specific version. We're shipping a web components version that you can add to any of your apps in any of the canvases that exist. Is it on a web page, in a Teams app, in an Electron app, in a SharePoint Framework web part? Anywhere you're thinking that these controls could land, you could actually add them there. So that's really, really useful when you're building really cool applications. So what's new for V3? You're going to see today not a lot of slides, a lot of demos. So what's new for V3? So first of all, we're coming with the fully refreshed components. And we're going to build, all our components now will be fully built using Fluent UI, which is the design language that a lot of the applications here at Microsoft are leveraging. And these components are now available to see. So I'm going to show you a sneak peek of some of these components. We're even going to share with you a link to a storybook where you can try them out. This storybook will not probably stay for very, very long, but if you want to use it, I'll be more than happy to direct you to another link afterwards so you can use it in the future. We're also bringing a really anticipated feature. I'll see a couple of interesting questions in the chat. I'm going to come back to the questions afterwards because these are cool. One of the most anticipated feature of V3 is multi-account support. So you will be able to leverage our login component to log into multiple accounts at the same time and shift from one identity to the other one, like the rest of the M365 applications. Really, really cool control right there. Generic picker control. We're going to build a new control that will allow you to pick an entity from graph in a very generic way. Think about how we're doing it with our MGT get, but in a picking experience, so very similar. We will be having something called the disambiguation feature that will be built in. And you're absolutely right, Gavin. It's not node 16, it's 14 and 16 for now. Look at that, changing stuff on the fly while doing a demo. How great is that? Our disambiguation feature will be built in, and Gavin will be showing a cool demo of this for all of our SharePoint Framework developers in the room. This will be the feature you're expecting for MGT to work seamlessly in SPFX. We're going to come up with the support for the Graph JavaScript SDK v3 in our journey very soon after, potentially to start having previews around our Graph JavaScript SDK v4, but that's for another talk. We're going to come back in the new year, talk about what's coming up right there. We're going to support sovereign cloud. So if you're building apps that are connecting to GCC or to any of the sovereign clouds we have, you will be more than happy to know that now these components will work for you. And finally, we're going to support Node 14, 16, and not 12, right? Because it's actually not supported anymore by Node. Right now, we're having a little bit of a question on Node 18 because actually SPFX does not support Node 18 today. So we're kind of in a state right now where we're waiting for the SharePoint framework to support Node 18. So, well, let's go and do some cool demos, I think. Let me go here, open up the browser right here, and now you can see our playground. And I'm going to share the link to this playground if you want to play, and just to show you that this is all real code running in a real environment. We're not faking anything here. Well, maybe you'll see. If you can spot it, then you're great. No, I'm joking. There's not going to be any fake here. So the first thing I wanted to show is the ability now to support multiple accounts in our login component. We're not logged into that storybook, so I'm going to show you in a way that's where we're going to fake it, to be fairly honest. But it is what I want to show you the feature right here. So when you're logging in, I'm already logged in as Megan here. I have the ability to actually change. Let me just zoom out a little bit here. To change the account to Emily Brown, or also to sign in with a different account. So you will always have this ability to have many accounts connected at the same time, like in any other M365 application. So if you're building an app where you are controlling the login experience, I think this is going to be a great feature to onboard. This is due to us leveraging the latest around MSAL that will be there. So that's really, really cool. Second thing that I wanted to add is a quick look at some of the refreshed components. So let's look at the agenda. Agenda looks like this. You're going to see some of our components are not necessarily very, very different. They have just been upgraded, right? But under the hood, there's a lot of components that have significantly changed. So you can see here what our agenda components looks like. We're leveraging the latest Fluent UI v9. So to come back to Olive's question, it is built on the latest version of Fluent, so it's on Fluent 9. We're leveraging the icons, the fonts, the sizing, and all of this. So really, really cool. Then afterwards, let's go to see our file list. Our file list here is also using the latest and greatest. Here on the file list, we were already using a lot of the Fluent stuff, so not a lot of changes happening right here. Our person card has changed significantly, not from a visual standpoint, but now we also bring new vertical layout. So now not only you have it on the horizontal side, but now we have it on the vertical layout. So now you have the ability to have these great person components showing up in a vertical way. The person card, let me show you a really cool, interesting capability of the new person card while I show the new layout. So really cool layout where I can now do inline typing of your messages, not only just opening Teams, but here literally having a message that you can send to Emily right from here, the same way you can do it in Microsoft Teams today. So a really, really cool capability that we're bringing in to the table, and all of the upgraded visuals that we have right here. An interesting new capability that we're bringing is our picker component. Our picker component is, in this case, to showcase task lists. So you have the ability to select here, and you see here how I'm using /me/to-do/list from Graph to show all the different task lists. But I could actually go here and say /me/direct, well, not necessarily all in caps, direct reports, and now it's going to automatically refresh and have predict to be available. So you will be able to build interesting capabilities right from there. And now it's really up to you to decide how you want to make it and shape it the way you need it for your apps. It's very developer friendly to simplify that specific capability of selecting a resource. The last one I want to show you is our Teams channel picker, because the Teams channel picker actually changed a lot in our latest release, which is here where you can select a channel, where we're going to load the channel, and here you see all the channels that you have, the teams that you're a part of, and the channels that are available here. So let's say I want to go here, I want to select general, and now you're going to see that it's selected this channel there. So lots of improvements, lots of UI components that have changed. We're doing this as a major release, so it might bring some unexpected changes on your side. So there will be breaking changes around styling if you were styling specific elements without utilizing some of our classes and variables that we provide. So something to look at. So we'd love to hear your feedback on some of these. If you want to take on a dependency on that next, more than happy to hear about it. And now I want to hand over to Gavin so we can see live some of the disambiguation capabilities that we're bringing to the toolkit.
Thanks, Seb. That was a great whirlwind tour of what the team's been working hard on since I joined and before. So if you didn't know, I'm new to the team since July, but I'm pretty happy to have landed on this pretty exciting project. One of the challenges that we've heard from the SharePoint developer community is that, well, to have multiple solutions in a single farm that use SharePoint framework at the moment, it doesn't work so well. We've got to have this thing called MGT SPFX, which provides all the controls, and that means that all those controls are version locked to the same version. So there's no side-by-side version support for different versions of web parts using older or newer versions of MGT. It's not so great. We've been looking at this, and there's some challenges, but what we've come up is with a feature that we call disambiguation. I'm just going to share my screen now. This one. All right. So you should see my Visual Studio Code instance. What we've added is a little thing, single line of code. That's easy. That's all you need to do, right? Not quite. Unfortunately, because of the way that this works, you actually need to start lazy loading some of the resources in here. We have added some helper functions to simplify this. This particular web part is a no framework web part, so it's just plain old JavaScript. If I go to, sorry, I should have opened this up ahead of time. I'd like to just quickly show you what's going on under the hood in there in our, so we're using dynamic imports or asynchronous imports, which use a promise to report when they're fully loaded. And then based on that being fully loaded, then we can actually render using MGT tags that have this disambiguation in them. So if you start using this feature, you might want to put your own company name inside here just as an easy way of doing it, or use a version number. We don't care. We've made this flexible. It's a completely opt-in system too. So if you're not in SharePoint land, you can just ignore this feature. It doesn't exist, doesn't impact you at all. Many of you in SharePoint land are probably a little more interested in how that works in React. Totally fair. We've got this hat working over in React as well. Same approach. We call this custom element helper with disambiguation. And then in our render method for our component, we actually lazy load the component that uses the React components that we have as part of our MGT React library. This MGT demo, you can see this is the place where we actually have our MGT components, and they live there. We need to make sure that we lazy load this. So this makes use of React suspense in the background to cleanly load these things and ensure that we don't get naming conflicts. To give you a sense of what that looks like in use, I actually broke this demo earlier this morning, so I've only got half of the demo. I'm sorry. But to just show you this in action, if the developer tools will play ball with me here, we can actually see here we've got, I'll just crank the zoom up on that. Oh, you get out of the road. There we go. We can see here that we're using all of our tags. So we've got our MGT Contoso person tag, and all of the tags all the way down the tree inside there use this Contoso disambiguation, so they won't collide with any other registered instance of that in the page. This will mean that you can have solutions from lots of different versions of MGT inside the same SharePoint page without causing issues. I will say right now we can't support MGT SPFX moving forward using this mechanism. That is currently looking to be discontinued with the as of version 3. And hopefully this is useful to a whole bunch of you.
I think it is, and I think that's great work. Thank you, Gavin, for sharing this. That's all coming into V3. From a date standpoint, we are looking at having a preview in the next few, I'd love to say days, but I think we're going to say a couple of weeks, where somewhere early in the next year where we're going to have probably our V3 available. So quite excited about you guys to start trying it out and enjoy the future of the Graph Toolkit. Quickly, what's new around the community and what we're going to come out with. We're going to build new scenario-based simple solutions, so you can start from something that delivers value right away, not just random, just simple templates. We're going to really build React and HTML and Vue and all of these scenario-based simple solutions. I already shared in the chat on how to share your feedback. So please use the link that I shared there to share the feedback you have around MGTV3. And finally, a couple of resources that I'd love you to go: our repo, our docs, our samples, our playground. And if you want to do some of our Microsoft Learn modules, more than happy to have you go there. Thank you for the opportunity to come talk to you all. We're very open to feedback, so feel free to chime in, and I'll stop sharing. And thanks all.
Thank you so much, Seb and Gavin. Really appreciate the demos and the walkthrough of what's coming up. Look for folks to contribute into there, share feedback, and so forth. All right, with that, we'll turn things over to Philip and Jose to talk to us a little bit about Microsoft Graph Data Connect.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Philip. I'm a senior product marketing manager and part of the Microsoft Graph Data Connect team. And today we're going to talk about how we can power business decisions with Microsoft 365 data and Azure Synapse. So the Microsoft Graph is a massive, rich pool of data, and we're talking about 18 trillion data points that are generated by 300 million Office 365 users, and like 270 million Teams users, right? So it's a huge amount of untapped data that is available for analytics. So I wanted to today kind of take a little bit of a deeper dive into this and show you what's actually available. So if we go to the next slide, you can see here a view of all of the data sets that are currently available through Microsoft Graph Data Connect, and it's a lot. So just what is Microsoft Graph Data Connect? So I just showed you like all of this data that is accessible through Microsoft Graph Data Connect, and what it does is it leverages M365 data at scale to empower insights and drive these different types of business decisions. So let's start by taking a look at how people are leveraging this data that I just showed you, and how customers are using that data sets to empower analytics, right? So there's a lot of different scenarios, and today we're just going to focus on the fourth scenario. And this fourth scenario is the security and compliance scenario on the bottom right. So Microsoft 365 data can help you understand how your employees are using and sharing sensitive information. And the demo today is going to be focused around the SharePoint information oversharing use case. So as you can see, each one of these scenarios are backed by several different use cases. And just because of the length of the time we have today, we're going to go over one of them, which is the information oversharing use case that Jose will present. And just to give you a little bit more background about it, the SharePoint information oversharing is a security and compliance use case powered by our newly available SharePoint usage and activity data sets, also known as ODSP data sets. So this allows customers to better understand how Microsoft information protection labels are constantly protecting their SharePoint data, maintaining information boundaries, and establishing new rules based on how sensitive data is managed and classified. So that just means like if you are, if you send out an email, like are you sharing it with too many people? Is it being shared with more than you had originally intended, right? Or is that information being shared outside corporate boundaries? So are people sharing it to their private emails? So this is actually something that Microsoft uses internally as well. So we'd like to show you like how we kind of set it up. And now I'm going to hand it over to Jose, who will present the demo on the SharePoint information oversharing use case. So feel free to take it away.
All right, so we are going to start the demo here in our Office UI, where I'm going to go and navigate to the Admin Center, right? So in the Admin Center is where we are going to configure the Microsoft Graph Data Connect so you can get access to all this data. So you do have to set it up. We go under Settings, Org Settings, and you will find here the Microsoft Graph Data Connect configuration. So what we want to do here is basically to turn on the Microsoft Graph Data Connect, which will allow us to transfer data from this tenant to an Azure storage account that you will configure. And we are also going to check the box for SharePoint Online and OneDrive. So I am focusing here in the SharePoint scenario. I am from the SharePoint team. And one more thing to highlight on this page is that when requests come in to the Microsoft Graph Data Connect, they do need to be approved. And this is where you would do it. For instance, there was a data request here, and you can see that someone requested some data, and you see what columns were requested, what kind of data set. So this one is about SharePoint sites. So you can see that every request that comes in will have to be approved at least once. Now, if you send multiple over time of the exact same request, then they can go and function in a recurring fashion, right? So next, we are going to go here and look at our Azure account. So you will need to have an Azure account to store the data that you're going to receive. So basically, I have here several storage accounts which have a few containers inside. And then I'm going to look here at my files, sites folder. And this is how the data comes to you, a set of JSON files. So in this Microsoft Graph Data Connect model, you don't actually do a request for each site one at a time. You actually tell it, give me all my sites. And then it transfers to you files with all your sites in one single operation, right? So let me go back and show you how this is done. So we are going to go here into the Synapse Analytics. And I'm going to go into my workspace here and open the Synapse Studio. So this is where we are going to create the pipelines that will move the data from Office to the Azure storage so that you can use it with all the interesting Azure data tools that you have available to you. So let's go here and take a look at the Integrate tab where you can see a few pipelines. So I have two different pipelines here. We can take a look at a simple one. This one is as simple as it gets. You have a copy data operation and you have a source. And you can see here that the source for this data is going to be a Microsoft Office instance. And you chose here one of the data sets. So this one is about sites, right? You can see all the columns. You can select all the columns or just a few. And if you trigger this pipeline, then it's going to actually bring the data over. How does the data look like? So you will go to your storage account and you will find, as a result, something like this, right? So you're going to have a JSON representation of, in this case, a sharing instance. So you see here, I have someone that shared a web called Size Experiment with full control shared with a SharePoint group called Size Experiment Owners. So you can see here one sharing action. But what we are going to do, we're going to bring that over to Power BI so you can bring you can build something like this. So you can bring that data into Power BI, so you should be familiar with this. And these are all the columns that are brought in. So you have information about size of each site. You have information about the templates that you use. So in this case, we have mostly group sites. So we also have some personal sites and some site publishing sites. But the focus, as we mentioned, is in the information over sharing. So if you want to build one of these, what you can do is you can go here and say, oh, I want to create my own pipeline. And you can go here and you say, I want to go and do a copy task. And I'm going to do a source type. And you can select here all these. And you select a connection. In my case, I'm doing source as Office. And then it was going to bring the list of data sets that you have available here. So if you're going for sites, you would select this one. If you want information about sharing, you would select this one. So these bottom ones are the three from our SharePoint collection. So let's go ahead and say this one. And you can go and say, oh, I want to get from the 25th to the 25th. So you select what dates you're going to bring over. And then what is the destination? So I'm going to say, oh, I want to put it in Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2. And then you just select the path where you're going to land this one. So this would give you something very similar to what we had before. But maybe what you want to do is not to bring just one data set, but you want to actually combine this to understand security overall. So for that, you would need information about sharing, combined with information about sites, combined with information about Active Directory groups, so you can do group expansion. So one way that you can do this is when you create this, you use our template that we publish to the gallery. So in the Synapse gallery, you have several different templates that you can use. If you simply search for SharePoint, you will find our advanced analytics and insights for SharePoint. And if I continue here, what this is going to do, it's going to give us a template that brings all that data, and then a couple of notebooks included to do the group expansion and combine everything together. And in order to bring this over to your workspace, all you have to do is select the inputs where you're going to link the service to your storage and to your Office configuration. So let's go ahead. Instead of doing this now, I have one that I already used. So here it is. It basically shows you that you have 3 copy data here from AAD, and then we combine this using a notebook, and then you have sites sharing here, and you combine these, and then you finally drop the results in your storage. So this will go a long way to help you understand how you would do this, and then you can customize this from the template. If you look here, you can monitor the execution. You have here one that succeeded. Actually, I'm running this on a recurring basis. So every day it collects the information. And you can see for this latest one here, you can see that it succeeded, and you can see the several tasks that were executed. For instance, the sites extraction. You can go here and see, for instance, that it got the data from Microsoft 365 to Azure Data Lake Storage. It took 26 minutes to do the whole operation and grab all the sites over. And you can also see that after it did those, you had also a notebook, for instance, to do the AAD group expansion. So you can take a look at that as well. And you can see here the notebook that we provided in the template. It has lots of comments, lots of explanations, and all the code that we use to do the group expansion and drop the right data in the right storage folder. So this is how you would run these pipelines, but then in the end, it lands in Power BI, right? Just pointing to the data that you have extracted. So you set up a dashboard like this one. So for instance, this one will show you how much sharing is done at the folder level, list level, site level. If you go to this one, you see how much sharing is being done and as full control or as added read, so the different types of role definitions, and even some more complex information here, like the classification of the site, the sensitivity label, highly confidential, protected, top secret, by the target domain. So if you're in Fabricam and you share data with Contoso, these are partner companies, so that's expected. But there's this acme.com domain here that I wasn't expecting. So you can understand how this happened, exactly what, which of these sites have been shared with each of these domains. So a very detailed view of what you can do in SharePoint, in your tenant, all the permissions, which is something that is sometimes very complex to achieve. So if you want to actually run through this whole process, we do have step-by-step guides. You can go to aka.ms/SharePoint data, all one word, to find the step-by-step to both create a simple pipeline that brings just one of the SharePoint data sets, or to do this whole template with lots of different data sets being pulled together for you. And we're focusing on the SharePoint scenario here, but these steps will also help you understand how the whole thing works if you want to do things, for instance, with Exchange data, with Teams data, or even together with Active Directory and SharePoint. So this was a quick demo of how you can configure your Office to share data with your Azure subscription and get all this insight about what's going on inside your tenant.
Excellent. All right. Well, thanks so much for the demonstration on there. Some great questions in the chat if you'd like to peruse those. But with that, we'll turn things over to John Miller to give us a little bit more on the latest with Teams Toolkit. John, the floor is yours.
Nice. Thank you. All right. We have roughly 11 minutes. So put your seatbelts on. We're going to move quickly, and I will share with you what's new in Teams Toolkit. If you've been here for the past several months, some of this will be pretty familiar to you. We've had Gary and Aisha on a lot to demonstrate many of the new features. So I wanted to take this time just to kind of recap what's happened over roughly the past 3 months with Teams Toolkit and highlight some of the big things that we've released. But for anyone who's new and maybe doesn't know what the heck I'm talking about, this is what Teams Toolkit is. It is our pro code developer tools and also includes an SDK that is focused on simplifying Teams app development. That includes creating, building, hosting, and publishing Teams apps. And there's a couple ways that we're trying to do that right now, and that's with quick start experiences. So we have project templates that really help you jumpstart how you get started with specific Teams apps that you can then transform into whatever business scenario you need to complete. And then we have some tooling features that make building and debugging, so running in Teams, debugging that code, a little simpler. And we also automate some of the configurations, so you can spend less time in the Teams developer portal right away and Azure portal and configuring all these different things in app IDs and just kind of jump right into code. So the toolkit helps you do that. And then we also have an optional set of features in the toolkit that provides some smart defaults for hosting in Azure using an infrastructure as a code approach. So we basically, all of our templates have bicep files that come with them to help you get started. And if you want to deploy that to Azure using the toolkit, that's optional. You don't have to use that, but we do provide it. The toolkit's available both VS Code and Visual Studio 2022. So depending on which stack you want to build with, you want to build with JavaScript, TypeScript, Node, visit the VS Code toolkit. That's what we focus on there. And if you're a .NET developer, then check it out in Visual Studio 2022. Real quick, if you want to get that for VS Code, it's in the marketplace. So just go ahead and search it like you would for any other extension. It's a Teams toolkit. And then for Visual Studio, it's in the VS installer. So you'll just click on the ASP.NET and web development workload. If you don't already have that, you'll want to install that. And then you can see here on the right-hand side, there's a little checkbox that says Microsoft Teams Development Tools. That's an optional component. That is the Teams Toolkit. You check that, and then you will have the Teams Toolkit installed. It's a very small download, so shouldn't take too long. Okay, that's how you get what I'm talking about. So what's new with what I'm talking about? First thing is we released a new sample app, I think back in September. It was Gary, I think, has demoed that. So Gary Trinder also released that, and it's in the Teams FX samples repo, which I put an AKA link there for you. You can check that out. That's where all of our Teams Toolkit specific samples are. And it's really just an example like stock ticker, check prices, send an adaptive card, shows you some ways to authenticate with an API key to a public API and just kind of helps complete out more samples for Teams Toolkit. So check that out if you're interested in samples. We've also been working on improving the Teams FX SDK and the things that we see developers doing. So there's been several quality of life improvements. This is one of them. We're trying to make it simpler to add single sign-on to bots and message extensions. So we already have what I feel is, and what we hear from you folks is a pretty simple SDK for doing SSO with tabs. So we're trying to do the same thing for bots. So here's an example of what that looks like. So we've basically have this TeamsFX bot SSO command handler, and then the change we did is we've broken out with these interfaces for the way you configure the authentication scheme. So you can do different types of authentication here. Here you see we have the OBO credential and basically 3 lines of code here. And then I cut out some of the parameters so that way the code would fit on the slide so you could see it a little nicer. So the important thing here is you basically have the credential, then we have some methods to help you get an authenticated graph client using that, and then you can go ahead and call graph the way you normally would with the graph client and do whatever your scopes allow you to do. So that helps make that a little easier, hopefully. We also released a new project template. So that's the workflow bot. Again, if you were here a few weeks ago, Gary showed pretty in depth on how that is. So you can look for that video if you want to see how that works. But basically, the template helps you create an application that will trigger some adaptive cards with actions in them. So here you see there's a button, do stuff. When you click do stuff, you get a response, and then you can basically change that adaptive card to display differently. So the way we've imagined folks can use this is we hear developers building lots of like sequential workflow type apps where they want to do something like I don't know, like a Q&A, or they want to do something like a ticket system, something like that. So this could help you build out whatever you want, but this helps you get started with that type of flow. A few weeks ago, we also changed how we expose debugging. So if you're familiar with VS Code, task.json, you can do this. Now with Teams Toolkit, basically we expose each step of the what debugging means with the toolkit. And this is based on feedback we got is like, hey, when I press F5 the toolkit, what the heck is happening? And how do I customize it? Because I don't want it to do certain things that it's doing. So now we've exposed all those steps as in a way we felt was familiar. And with your feedback, we've changed it to be task.json driven. So you can go ahead and customize each step here. Like I just put an example here from our documentation, show you like if you don't want to run ngrok, then you could comment that out and it just makes it a little simpler, change your ports, that kind of stuff. On the left here, the table just shows all the steps, like all the tasks that are possible to customize. So basically this is like a sequence of all the things that we do when you press F5. And so you can go ahead and customize them in the task.json file. So look for that. We're also going to bring the same type of customization in the Visual Studio extension in a way that's familiar with .NET developers. Don't quite know how that looks at the moment, but we're working on building that feature. There's also a new feature here for you to be able to add SSO to your projects later. If you decide when you scaffold you don't want SSO, but then you say, hey, I'd like to add it. Do I need to create a whole new project? No, you can use the toolkit command. So available both VS and VS Code. There's basically some menu options here to add the scaffolding that we do later. And then there's some documentation that pops up to tell you each of the steps you need to, and I believe Gary walked through that as well recently, at least in the VS Code scenario. I think he walked through that and demonstrated all the steps that are required to add SSO using the toolkit and TeamsFX SDK after the fact. So trying to make that a little simpler today. So there's some menu options for there. And there's some other stuff here that we changed recently for SPFX developers. We now, our scaffold can now do multi-tab Teams apps, and there's a way to do that via the add features. Just like you can add feature, add SSO, there's another way to do this for SPFX projects, which is another way that we can choose to scaffold. So our scaffolds in VS Code, you can either scaffold with React or SPFX. And then we recently bumped TeamsFX SDK to 2.0, and that was really to align with the Teams. Oh, I made a typo here. It's supposed to be Teams JS 2.x. Sorry about that. So that way it's compatible with Teams JS, and that also helps us be able to deploy to Office and Outlook and use all the new manifest and everything. And then there's some additional quality of life improvements that TeamsFX SDK and a bunch of little stuff that we just get feedback on and in the repo. So you can take a look at the changelog to see all the things there. Big thing to talk to let you know about is what's next. So that everything I just discussed was things that are already available today. But what's next is we're getting a lot of feedback on more like make the toolkit more transparent. There's lots of opaque things that it does, and we need to customize it, and we totally understand that. So we've been working with developers to figure out exactly how to do that. And so we've come up with basically we're going to take everything the toolkit does and expose it in a way that can be config driven. And so the first iteration of that is available in an alpha state on the GitHub repo for the VS Code extension. There's an alpha release available for this. You could play with if you wanted to, but right now we're kind of just testing that internally. Basically, we have something that looks a lot like an Azure DevOps YAML or GitHub Actions file that's very similar kind of layout. So we have this YAML file that describes all the different steps of the toolkit. So this is the other things like earlier we talked about debugging. This is the life cycle, like end-to-end pieces that the toolkit does, which is like provisioning, deploying, registering the app with Teams Developer Portal, configuring the Azure AD manifest, and linking all those things together, and like the bot framework registrations, things like that. We're going to expose all of those steps so that they could be customized. I think this is cool because if you want to use, let's say you don't want to use our provisioning with Azure and Bicep, you could swap this out to use maybe something you'll already do, like, hey, run this PowerShell script, and it's like stuff you already do, or use some other CLI tool that's like AZD, CLI, or Terraform, or whatever you want to do. You could put those steps in here, and we'll have examples of how you could do some of those popular things that we get feedback on. So this is coming. Like I said, there is an alpha available. I'll have more information, and I think we'll come back and demonstrate that when we're a little further along. And then also we have an RC available for VS to do the same type of thing. So we're trying to align both VS Code and VS projects to adopt this kind of app model so you can configure it. And I'll come back and demonstrate exactly how that works. So that's what I have to share with you. I don't have time to jump into any code right now, but there's lots of things you can find on the internet for Teams development, and Teams FX. I put this link here. You can just jump into our GitHub repo. From there, you'll be able to find everything that you need. And that's all I have.
Excellent. Thank you so much, John, for sharing today. We'll be sure to invite you back for a future session so that you can dive into a little bit more of the updates or other things that are coming along. So
perfect.
Appreciate that so much. All right. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining in today. I'll pull up the slides really quickly, and we'll go through our last quick little outro. Big thank you to Seb, to Gavin, to Philip, to Jose, and John for presenting today. Really appreciate all the things that they shared with us. Great information and things for us to be able to look into. With that, our recording for today's session will be available within 24 hours on the Microsoft 365 community YouTube channel. You can find that at aka.ms/m365/videos. Feel free to subscribe, keep up to date on things that are going on out there. We'd love to see your views, your comments, anything else that you might want to share on there. Also, please follow along with us on Twitter at Microsoft 365 Dev or at M365 PMP. Our next call will be December 6th, same time as usual, 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific time. All the different community calls, again, you can find at aka.ms/m365/calls. And just a quick little reminder, as we get a little bit later into the December weeks, we will be going to more of a kind of coffee and tea chat, since we will not have a lot of folks who will be in office. So a little more informal time for us to be able to get together. If you have questions or scenarios, things like that, love to kind of share the things that I get there with that. With that, thank you so much, everyone, again to our presenters and for our community folks for joining in. Really appreciate this. Look forward to seeing you folks next week, and have a great rest of your day. Thanks so much, everyone. Bye.